Welcome back to the Penn GSE podcast, where you'll get perspectives on education and social science from the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education. I'm Tom Ketchkamethy. Today on the podcast,
stay away from me. Don't come anywhere near me.
We'll take a look at kids in virtual worlds, what they do there, what they learn there, and what they can tell us about ourselves.
Ew, gross, get away from me.
Stay tuned. Back in the mid-'70s, when I was in elementary school, we didn't have computers in the building. Same with middle school. But by high school, we had a few. They were sequestered in a special room. A little bit of word processing went on in there, but mostly it was a place where computer-interested faculty and students could program in BASIC and hold forth about binary code. And some of us, if we were lucky, got to escape there to play games. For years, those computer games were considered separate from serious education, which took place in the classroom. But is it possible that us kids could have actually been learning from computer games?
20 years ago, this was a question nobody asked.
Yasmin Kafai is a professor who studies learning sciences here at Penn GSE. And 20 years ago, she was asking that question.
Everybody was so concerned about the social and emotional effects of game, about the violence, about the gender stereotyping. You have to remember at that time, most girls actually did not use computers at all. And I think I kind of created a viable model to show that you could use games for learning, and you could actually do so within a classroom environment.
Yasmin started out with math games. She asked a group of older kids to find unique ways of enticing younger kids into learning what many consider to be the ultimate in classroom drudgery: fractions.
So it turned out that the kids created a whole range of different contexts, from skiing slope, where somebody would ski down, and if they answered a question incorrectly, they would have to kind of go back to the top of the hill. Or another game was created around the Greek myth, where the player was in charge of reassembling a map which had been ripped into pieces, and then in the end he or she would be able to meet the god or goddess of fractions and play a game with them.
The experiment was a success. The younger kids learned about fractions, and the older kids also learned about problem solving, game design, computer programming, and everyone seemed to enjoy the process, both boys and girls. So Yasmin broadened the scope of her work to language, to arts and advertising, to science.
Designing ocean simulations of the human body, space exploration, electricity.
Through creating and playing these games, the students covered all of the material required by the school's science curriculum. Yasmin kept the program going for 4 years. So the youngest kids, the game players, eventually became the game designers with their own apprentices.
And I think that emulates much more closely situations you have in the workplace. Teams are often composed of mixed abilities, mixed backgrounds, and people have to learn how to kind of work together and also provide support when needed.
These days, the study of games and learning is much less marginal than it was when Yasmin started out. Researchers understand that we need our youth to be interested in computer science and technology, and that games are a great way of developing that interest. Today, Yasmin is still involved in game research. Her attention is mostly turned to virtual worlds, and particularly a science site called Whyville, spelled like the question, why?
It's actually, I think, the oldest educational virtual world. It started in the late 90s. And so youth find out from each other that they can go there, play science games to earn virtual currency, which allows them to accessorize their avatars.
If this term is new to you, an avatar is basically a computerized version of yourself that you use to explore a virtual world. You create it. You give it eyes, lips, hair, clothes, and a name, of course. A name like this one.
Aiden Lover.
Candace Gazzetti is 16. She's been on Whyville since she was 12.
Well, when I was in 6th grade, I was dating this boy named Aiden, and yeah, it's kind of dorky, but I was like, oh, I love him, he's my boyfriend, so I made it Aiden Lover.
Over the last 5 years, Candace has played and beat all of the games on Whyville. She especially likes the one on light rays, and she likes chatting with her friends. But one day, something unusual happened.
It was horrible.
Candace logged on to Yville.
And all of a sudden I had these like red spots on my face, on my avatar. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And so I went to the newbie help and asked them, and they were like, oh, you have YPOX, that's for you.
YPOX is a virtual epidemic, kind of a mix between the chicken pox with all those red spots and the common cold. It makes your avatar say achoo and erases what you were typing. Candace tried to carry on like normal, chatting with other avatars, but when they saw her red spots and virtual sneezing,
and everybody just goes, ew, gross, don't talk to me. And so, all your little virtual friends don't talk to you anymore.
That's because, just like with the real-life disease, YPOX can spread. Nobody knows exactly how, if it's from standing too close to someone, chatting to them, or what. Okay, a few people know. And one of them's Yasmin. That's because she's one of the people who helped create this virtual epidemic.
And then we created a virtual center for disease control where you could go and study the outbreak, run your own simulation, discuss and debate with others what the possible causes were, how you would attract the disease, how you could protect yourself. And I think these were really important experiential components which we integrated in a science class where students were learning about the history and current infectious diseases.
But students haven't been the only ones learning from YPOX.
Real serious epidemiologists are interested in studying virtual communities now because they realize they can study how people behave in face of an epidemic, something they cannot do in real life for ethical reasons. And it's also because most kids now have been vaccinated, those childhood diseases. So in virtual communities, you can actually see some very interesting behaviors. For instance, there's a lot of curiosity seeking. People actually happen to go to places where there is a large outbreak. This is not something it's clear you would do in real life. Most people would think you would stay away from a hospital. And I think these are factors which have not been included in the models which mathematicians or epidemiologists have built so far. So in some ways, the kids were actually at the forefront of what's happening in science research right now.
Yasmin says it might be hard to believe, but people's behavior online is probably not that far off from how they behave in real life. And as much as 16-year-old Candace hated having YPOX, she thinks Yasmin's right.
When you're kids and you're on Yville, it turns into a really big part of your, life. Like, you just sit there all the time on the computer, and you're like, oh, this is me. You are in Yville.
We know that kids spend hundreds billions of hours in front of these screens, so we might as well figure out on how we can kind of leverage this participation for kind of learning environments. Because I think we have a lot of problems in figuring out ways to motivate kids. And I have always kind of like to map out these uncharted territories before kind of people even discovered it as a promising learning opportunity.
Yasmin Kafai continues to map the uncharted territory of how kids behave and learn in Yville. Most recently in a paper about what we can learn from online flirting. She has also co-edited 2 recent books. Beyond Barbie and Mortal Kombat takes a look at issues of gender equity in electronic gaming, and The Computer Clubhouse investigates urban youth engagement in a successful online after-school program. The Penn GSE podcast is a production of the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education and is produced by Hilary Frank. Trevor DeClercq wrote our theme music. I'm Tom Ketchkamethi. To learn more about this project and others, go to gse.upenn.edu.